guidelines prohibits swearing, and I support this plan. But at one point, rather than how Steve handled it, I will need to quote, when I need to quote somebody who used a bad word to me, for the purposes of this talk, that word will be aardvark. I will be talking a lot about the game developers Dale Lear and Steve Bjork, and sadly, neither of them are still with us, but they provided us with many fantastic games, far more than I did. And I only consider myself a minor star in the CoCo constellation, but I'm really proud to have been a part of it all, and it was a heck of a ride. I loved it. My poor wife might have hoped that she was marrying this guy, but when she got dragged along for the ride, she found out that she was married to this guy. My first exposure to computers was a PDP-8 at the local community college, and my first ever computer job was managing this beast. I learned BASIC on it, of course, but also assembler, which came in super handy later. And when I first started this job, the PDP-8 was crashing about 4 times a day, and looking around in various drawers that no one had ever looked in, I found a bunch of change orders from the manufacturer, from DEC, saying, you need to patch the operating system in this way to stop it from crashing 4 times a day, for example. And so I decided to do that. And my boss was very happy with that, because then it would only crash about every 3 days. And then pretty soon I was patching the operating system on my own to make the PDP-8i. It was running TSS-8. It was a multi-user basic system, and it had an idle job where it wasn't doing anything else useful. It would just rotate bits in the front panel. So I changed the pattern. It was counting up in binary, and then I turned it into like a Knight Rider, back and forth. And I did that by patching the operating system as it was running, which was kind of interesting. So anyway, all that came in super handy later. At my first real computer job out of college in 1982, I met this guy, my coworker Dale Lear, and we quickly became friends. This is a picture of him taken when he was young and healthy, and that's how I like to remember him. Unfortunately, cancer circled around for the 3rd time and finally got him. When home computers became a thing, I dreamed of getting a computer of my very own. So at the time, I had my eye on an Atari ST. But Dale and several others at work, including another friend, Jim Issel, and then Dale's brother, Paul, and a guy named Bob Newcomb, they had bought a Tandy color computer in Mercedes silver with the chiclet keyboard. They all ganged up on me and showed me what this machine could do and talked me into it. Yeah, I want one of those. And we had a sizable federal tax refund coming up. So I told my wife, and she said, no. We need to get a kerosene heater. This house is drafty and cold. And she was right. It was. But I want to buy a color computer. No, she said, we're getting a kerosene heater, and that's that. So when I bought the color computer, she had some kind of feelings about that. Before long, she was saying, you spend too much time fooling around on that damned computer. We did get the kerosene heater right after that with a state tax refund check, and that's why I'm alive today. I carpooled to work each day with Dale and Jim and several other coworkers who all owned color computers in Dale's old rattle-trap antique milk van. Why he had an antique milk van and why he used it to commute with, I really could not tell you. I never understood that then or now, but we did. So on the way, we discussed concepts for games we hoped to make, shouting over the roar of the engine. Dale's idea was a game that he called Superfly versus the Amazing Chomping Things. You would be directing the path of a little fly around the screen with your joystick, being chased by a bunch of things like a pair of chomping false teeth and various other objects. Well, the false teeth didn't happen, but he did finish the game, and he sent it to Tandy on a Quasar Commander cart that he'd repurposed. When I've told this story before, I was under the impression that it was a Dino Wars cartridge. But recently I found something I wrote long, long ago on the web. Actually, it was on Usenet. And I said that it was a Quasar Commander cart. So that's probably what it was. So he cracked it open to install his own EEPROM to try to really impress Tandy and say, yes, this will work. And it did work. So this, of course, was the game that became Double Back. That was his first game. My ideas became the game Temple of Rah, and it was inspired by largely by the Atari 2600 adventure game. Remember that? That was fun. I played the heck out of that. Another big influence was the fantasy novels of Catherine Kurtz, and that's why teleportation in my game happens via transfer portals, which is a term from her books. I even had a user's manual with an elaborate backstory for the game, a tale of an intrepid adventurer in a fantasy setting sent to reclaim the temple for its original inhabitants who had been driven out by an occupying evil empire. But I wanted to do some things different than the Atari adventure game. I wanted smooth scrolling in a very large maze. Now right here is, that's the graph paper that I actually drew the maze on. There was 9 pieces of graph paper that were arranged in a big square. So I found the actual original graph paper that I drew that on, so that was kind of fun. I developed Temple of Rah on an early Mercedes Silver color computer with chiclet keys, a cassette player, a Mercedes Silver RCA color TV, and an Edit-A-Sem cart. No floppy disk drive, too expensive. People talked to me and said, buy the floppy disk drive, you will not regret it. And I said, I do not have any money for a floppy disk drive. It doesn't matter, buy it. You will thank yourself. And I'm like, which one of my 3 children do I not feed to afford this thing? Yeah, maybe I sell my car. Yeah, that would be good. So that's why the source was on 3 20-minute cassette tapes. Needless to say, I kept meticulous backups on numerous cassettes. Some of those early color computer models had a glitch in the power supply that would cause intermittent crashes, and I had one of those. I would be working on the game, and sometimes the video would fade in and out, warning me that a crash was imminent. So I'd whip off the cover. None of us had the screws in the covers, did we? I'd take a can of Freon and spray it into the power supply, and that would turn the power supply into a little ice sculpture, and that would stabilize things. So one day that happened while I was saving the tape, and I went to spray that Freon into the computer, and nothing happened. The can was empty. So I leaned over and started blowing endlessly into the power supply with my breath, over and over, hyperventilating until I almost passed out. Finally, I heard the motor relay click off for the final time, and I was saved. So I sent Tandy a floppy with the game on it, and after a few weeks, Mark Siegel called me back. It's a beautiful game, he said. This is totally lame and cliche, but I just like blue screened on the spot. And then when I finally rebooted, I said, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. What did you say again? It's a beautiful game. Oh, it's like, oh yes, could you say that a third time? No, I didn't say that, but I wanted to. Tandy bought both Double Back and Temple of Rah, and that put us on the map. Mark did mention, I hate the name though. I told him, hey, you can change that to whatever you want. But somehow that never came up again. So Temple of Rah it was. ROM, of course, was a subtle reference to read-only memory, although I was careful not to make it too obvious. I spelled it, ROM with an uppercase R and lowercase OM in all my correspondence to them. Some of the replies listed it as ROM in all caps, though, so I think they were on to me. I stalked Radio Shack stores for months looking for my first copy in the wild. And when I finally got one, I got a surprise. Unbeknownst to me, they had thrown out my medieval fantasy scene user's manual and put in their own with a space exploration theme. You are an archaeologist for the Galactic County Council of Free Worlds, sent to discover the mysteries of the Temple of Rah, located on the desert planet of Rolok. Rolok? Who the what now? Oh, color spelled backwards, yes. At least they kept the transfer portal terminology. That's about the only thing that survived this change to Temple of Rah in space. Temple of Rah sold quite well. Look at that chart. That's kind of nice. So there's a spike in January as all the Radio Shack stores got 2 copies each. I got my royalties for each copy of the game that were sold, and I got the royalties up front. It's like if they sell it to the stores, I get the money. Ka-ching. And then, when the stores sell it, that's not my problem anymore. So you can see about, what looks like about 3,000 as all the various stores loaded up. And then in August, or September, there's a spike, goes up to about 9,000, 6,000. 6,000. So that's $1.50 each that I got. So the first royalty check was in the tens of thousands. So my wife's eyes got quite wide when she saw that. She said, "Why don't you go fool around some more on that damned computer?" Because the Atari Adventure game, of course, had a very famous Easter egg where if you did the right things, you would see the programmer's name. So I had to put an Easter egg in Temple of Rah, of course. So I have there's this Easter egg where if you do the right things, you can walk through walls. It doesn't do you any good, but it was just something so I could go in and say, "Hey, watch this," I then, it's like, well, that worked really well, so let's do another game for Tandy and sell it to him. So I developed a game called Bomb Threat. And it was a little bit like Pingo, moving things around. The whole idea was you're in a warehouse, and you're a warehouse worker, and you've got a forklift, and you're moving boxes around, and some of them have bombs in them. So you have to take the merchandise and move it away from the bombs, and vice versa. If you feel brave, you can push a bomb away from a box before it goes off, if you feel really lucky. So I got all done with that. My kids played the heck out of that. They absolutely loved it. So it was all done, and I sent it into Radio Shack, and I didn't hear back from them for a long, long time. And then every once in a while I would ping them and say about that game. It's like, well, I don't know, we're kind of still looking at it. At one point they said, well, we might buy it if you did this. So I did that, whatever that was, and sent it back in again. And finally, the answer came back, no. I think that was because that was a Color Computer 1 and 2 game, and the Color Computer 3 was going to come out. I'm not even sure that it had been announced yet, but it was about to come out to be announced. And they were looking for Color Computer 3 games, not 1 and 2 games. That's my guess. So who knows? So then, after that no came in, I started on a game called Omnistar. That was a game where you hacked into a computer network, but I never finished it. I don't know why. We'll come back to that later. We'll also come back to Bomb Threat later. So at that point, Dale and Jim and I got online, and we joined the Delphi CoCo Special Interest Group, sponsored by Rainbow Magazine. So this is a screenshot from an online archive of Delphi messages that I put on the web, by the way. Early on, Dale called up Rainbow and said, "Hey, do you want us to write articles for you?" And they said, "Nah, we're good." He said, "Oh, did I mention that I have a prototype CoCo 3? And they said, "Yes, please." So I wrote a Color Computer 3 terminal program that was originally named RickyTerm, similar to the name of another popular terminal program, Mikey Term. And Delphi later asked me to add some features to that, and then they christened it as Delphi Term. So we all started writing articles for them, for Rainbow Magazine. And Dale would usually write the programs, and I'd clean them up a little bit and then write the articles. And Jim Issel wrote game reviews. Now this is a bit of history here. This is the entry of, I had a UUCP node on the early internet called C Central for Color Central Software, which is what I called myself. I never actually filed like a doing business as or a DBA. I just sort of called myself Color Central Software just so I'd have something to call myself other than just it's me. So there was a lot of friendly competition between the Delphi folks and the CompuServe folks. So people had been begging me to do a UUCP implementation for a long time so that CoCo 3 users could connect to the internet, exchange email, and post to Usenet news and that sort of thing. But there was already a team working on that, and it was a bunch of CompuServe folks. It could be that some people that were on that team are in this room today, so I better watch my P's and Q's. So I didn't see the need until they announced that they were almost done and they would be releasing it onto CompuServe only. And my first reaction, of course, was, hey, wait. And then I thought, no, that's fair. They do the work. They get to decide where it gets uploaded. But I wanted something like that to be on Delphi, too. So people have been sending me all of the documents explaining, all the protocols, and here's how you do it, and here's how you connect, and here's how you exchange messages. So I pulled that out and said, I don't know, how hard could this be? Well, yes, it's hard. So I started coding my own implementation. And I was the Usenet manager at work, so it was pretty convenient to test by connecting to my own node at work. And it took me about a month. And pretty soon the other team posted on the CoCo mailing list, if you can read this, you are seeing the first email posted to the list from a CoCo 3. And I said, oh, I feel terrible, but I have to do this. I replied, actually, I posted an email from my CoCo 3 last week. Now, you might imagine that caused a bit of consternation among the CompuServe guys, but imaginings are all you would have because they were nothing but gracious to me. They were really nice. It's like, oh my goodness, we never realized anybody else was working on this. How fantastic. So that UUCP implementation was then later expanded by Bob Bilson and is now known as UUCP BB. So this slide is the historic entry of my UUCP node C Central, a CoCo 3 in my den into the UUCP maps. And then Activision came. They wanted Shanghai. So I got to visit Activision's headquarters and meet my project manager, Sherry, who was really wonderful. She sent flowers on the birth of my daughter. She was very, very good to me. I demonstrated a CoCo 3 for her because that was kind of new to them. And so I ran the famous Sockmaster bouncing ball demo. And somebody passing by saw that in action and said in a rather bored voice, oh, right, the Amiga bouncing ball. And Sherry told him, look again, it's a Tandy Color Computer 3. And he did a double take. I didn't know we were doing things for the color computer. She grinned real big and said, we are now. So the Color Computer 3 port of Shanghai was born, and due to memory constraints, I could only fit a small fraction of the Victory Dragon screen, despite my best efforts. It was going to be awesome, this full dragon dropping from the skies, talon outstretched, breathing fire, and nope, can't fit it in. I had some code in the Shanghai source that would test to see, is the image too big? And if it did, it would do an extra beep or two when you started it up. That code actually is still in the cartridge, by the way. But it doesn't go off because it fits the cartridge just fine. Because I shrink it down a little bit more, too big. More, too big. Fine. There's just the head in the cartridge. That's all there is. We were so bummed, but what are you going to do? So and then disaster struck. This brings us to The Last Ninja. Now, various people writing books have called me up over the years, invariably eager to get me to spill the tea on this one infamous project. As the saying goes, success has many fathers. Failure is an orphan. But everybody loves a good train wreck. This project was originally offered to Dale Lear, who turned it down. Now, Dale's a pretty smart guy. That should have been a big clue for me. Here's the schedule for the game that Activision sent me. And if you look it over, you'll see that they expected coding to take about 4 months. Note the $1,000 for contract execution up at the top. That will turn out to be important in a little bit. This game was to be done on OS 9, and OS 9 is good for many things, but in my opinion, this game was not one of them. For one thing, there was a polyphonic soundtrack during gameplay. Google gameplay videos for the Amiga version. It sounds completely awesome. My best efforts at music for the one demo that I produced were miserably pathetic. It was one tone, and it sounded like it was done with the bit banger, and it was like, pathetic. So if you feel like you're not going to make the deadline, please let us know, Sherry told me. And I reached a point where I had to admit defeat because I was working on this game. I was working full time, and then I would work on the game when I got home until 3 in the morning. And that went on for quite a while, and it's like, I can't do this. So I returned to Activision headquarters, where they led me to a room where I met up with this guy, Steve Bjork. Yes, opinions vary on Steve. I will say he was an interesting guy, but I did like him. The way I look at it is I have a number of people that I know that are 95% awesome, and they are 5% sharp, jagged edges you don't want to touch and buttons you really don't want to push. And some of those people are my friends today. And I would sort of put Steve in that category. I do know that he was, the most defining characteristic was that he was enviably secure of his place in the universe. But I went to, there was a color computer convention. It wasn't a Rainbow Fest. I think it was a local group in Anaheim, California. So I went to that, and Marty Goodman was there, and Steve Bjork was there. Steve was in his element because he used to work at Disneyland as a tour guide on the Jungle Cruise ride in Adventureland. And Weird Al wrote a song about that. Look it up on YouTube. And so he was happy as a pig in mud. So those are the happy times with Steve. But this was not one of those happy times. So he looked over the source code listing that I brought him, and he immediately focused on the fact that it was structured as assembler routines called by a main line written in C. And he said, "Oh, I see your problem right there. Oh, this will not do it all." He felt that was too inefficient. Well, he's not wrong. That was inefficient, but in my opinion, not to the degree that he thought. But it doesn't really matter. I was going to be rid of the project, and I was about to walk out of that room a happy, free man. And I was good with that, and I am good with that. This is going to be easy, he crowed. Sherry asked me if it was okay if I gave him my early completion bonus. Huh? Let's see. Early, completion. My work was neither early nor complete, so I felt I had no right whatsoever to say boo about it. So sure, no problem here. Steve was elated. We're going to make a mint on this project. Steve did not make a mint on that project. He failed just like I did. So he later complained that there were aspects to the game nobody told him about, like one screen where a freaking dragon rose up to do battle with you from a river that you were crossing. he was kind of peeved about that. I can't say that I blame him. I would have been peeved too had I even known that at the time. He discovered that later. So that was like a little surprise that was waiting for me if I was foolish enough to continue. So he showed people a demo of how far he got one time at a convention at CoCo Fest. He got a lot further than I did. There were animated enemies able to do combat. They just stood motionless for my demo. Much later, I was at a restaurant after a CoCo Fest where he was a speaker, and he was seated opposite me. Oh, there was a fun thing that he would do at conventions where he would be in the front row of, say, somebody like Marty Goodman who would be giving a presentation. And as Marty was doing his presentation, he would pipe in with, "Oh, and you forgot to mention da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Oh, and also blah, 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 blah. Oh, and did I tell you all this other thing?" You know, and then Marty would get to talk for a little bit, and then Steve would break in again. And then pretty soon Steve would stand up to speak. And then as he spoke, he would edge closer to the podium, and he would push Marty aside. And then he would take over. And then eventually, I meant to look for this YouTube. There's a YouTube video out there. I need to find it again. That shows Marty, after that, edging back and pushing Steve aside to try to take over his own presentation. So anyway, we're at this restaurant. I'm seated across from him, and someone was praising him for something or other, and he felt the need to reply by saying, "Oh, that's nice. Of course, some people think I'm an aardvark. Isn't that right, Rick?" Leaning in really close to me, and he hissed, "I'll have you know we lost our shirts on that project." Well, I was kind of baffled as to where that aardvark bit came from, so I don't really actually recall making that kind of a comment about Steve, but I suppose it's possible. The only money I got from that project was $1,000 for signing on. Steve noted that later, and he decided that he wanted that money, and he threatened to sue me if I didn't fork it over. So my response was, "Gee, I'm sorry to hear that." And happily, I never heard anything after that. So that whole experience really took me off my feed, I'll tell you. So after that, I took a break, and I did some more OS 9 stuff for a while. This is back when Raspberry Pis made Unix affordable to the masses, and so it was before Raspberry Pis made Unix available and affordable for normal people. So OS 9 was the best game in town, and from my experience working with Unix in my first computer job, I was very, very used to using VI. VI as a text editor on Unix is not everybody's cup of tea, but I learned it back when it was the only one, and I know it like the back of my hand, so I still use it. So if you don't like it, I totally empathize. But so anyway, Dale's TS Edit editor was very VI-like, but there were a lot of VI commands that it didn't support that I was in the habit of using, and that was annoying me. So I altered a copy of the TS Edit source code that Dale gave me to add them. I distributed it as a patch file for legal reasons, although that was pretty much a joke. I mean, it's like, here's a Dodge Dart, and then here's a patch. Here's a patch file to it, and then it converts it into a Cadillac. So, I mean, who am I kidding here? But so eventually, I quit the scene altogether, and got rid of all my equipment, gave it away, and then came back many years later. And this is why I feel a certain humility. Some of you guys never left. Also, I feel a certain gratitude because some of you guys spent your lawn mowing money to buy Temple of Rah, and with the royalty checks from that, I bought a new car, which, I figured I was going to be the only new car I was ever going to see. So my reemergence onto the scene started with Bomb Threat. Remember Bomb Threat? My kids called me up all excited one day. I didn't have any files related to Bomb Threat after several moves. No source, no nothing. But they suddenly remembered we had an old videotape of gameplay. and they rushed it over to dig it out of storage, and then I had something to go on. So I analyzed the heck out of that tape, got it to work, and recreated the game from scratch, first using emulators and then later trying it out on an actual Color Computer 3. John Linville even produced cartridges of the game. So I showed the game off at the first Tandy assembly, and now we are up to date with 2017. So now to continue with what I've been up to lately. My next big project was Omnistar, that game that I started but never finished back in 1984, where you're hacking into a worldwide computer network. I couldn't find my design notes or any files for the game, no source, no nothing, so I programmed it again from scratch based on what I remembered of the basic concepts. I never did much with BASIC back in the day, so I decided for a change of pace I'd give that a try. But the overhead of line numbers and continuation characters and so forth drove me mad. So I programmed a BASIC preprocessor in Python that would convert BASIC code in this sort of BASIC 09-ish format into legit disk extended color BASIC source. It's called DECBPP, Disk Extended Basic Preprocessor, and it assigns line numbers, tacks lines together, throws out comments, and so forth. It's not a proper parser, so it's not all that clever. It doesn't handle nested ifs, for one thing, but it does keep me sane. So DECBPP and all this pretty syntax highlighting is included on Ron Klein's CoCo Pi distribution, by the way, if the idea of working with the VI text editor doesn't give you hives. For example, I used it to pre-process the source for this kiosk program I used to allow people to play my games at conventions. That's what's running on my CoCo 3 at Neil's table today. So you probably have questions about what you see listed here. So on this list of things you can run, so let's go over some of them. Temple of Rah 2 is the original game that's been enhanced a bit. I expanded the maze by 45% and I added 2 new monsters. Skulls are these nasty little aardvarks that come at you really fast. And there are ghosts. They're sneaky. They're invisible until you get near them. And then, oops, watch out. You can get a bit of a jump scare there. There's even a level builder utility on templeofrah.com, although it's a bit fuzzy. And I don't know if anybody's ever actually successfully built a level. So that doesn't speak a lot toward my user-friendliness. The 3 20-minute cassettes are one with the snows of yesteryear, as you might expect, but I started with a disassembly of the game that was done by Bill Astle. I did find one cassette that said Temple of Rah on it, and I was very excited, and then it turned out I had written over it with a lecture that was given by my friend Jim Issel. So, well, no source for that. All right. The Shanghai game listed on the menu actually plays a custom version of Shanghai with a few improvements. The original game had a secret color set that was accessed by clicking on a hard-to-find spot somewhere to the left of the screen. That color set was the original colors during all of development and testing. And Activision changed that at the last second. And I much preferred that color set, so I hid them as an Easter egg. And the little spot was really tiny because I didn't want anybody to find. I was deathly afraid that Activision was going to find it during testing. And I didn't know what they were going to do to me. Probably string me up by my thumbs or not pay me or something. I don't know. But anyway, the secret color set is a secret no more. Activision's color set is listed up there as RGB1, and mine is RGB2. So with more memory to play with, I was able to get a lot more of the victory screen on, the screen that you see when you win the game. But I still couldn't fit the entire thing. It was like about a half to 2/3 of it I could fit. So that made me feel a lot better. And so the rights to Temple of Rah reverted back to me after 2 years, according to my contract. But on the other hand, the legal rights to Shanghai are a bit murky, so I'm limited as to what I can legally do with it. So it's only on my GitHub for historical and educational purposes. But you may have noticed another Shanghai item on the menu, which is Shanghai 2. This is a version of Shanghai for 512K that has those same improvements plus a little bit more. So this new loading screen is what Activision originally wanted it to look like before we abandoned that early on due to lack of memory. And the victory screen now shows the entire full-screen dragon in all its fire-breathing glory. This color chart that's on that menu is one that Dale and I cooked up for a Rainbow article on the CoCo 3. The original assembler code had a glitch, though. It changed the palette registers in a way that was a bit sloppy, so there were white dashes down the left side of the screen. At the time, we didn't know what that was about, so we just left it. As I recall, we had like a line in the article that made some lame excuse for it being there. I don't remember what we said. Nowadays, that's not so much of a mystery. So recently I was able to consult with some people online and fix that, so that made me feel happy. This is my roguelike game, Dragon Maze. Somebody did one of those online coding challenges to code a roguelike game in BASIC. So I came up with this, but I never formally submitted it to the competition because I was too lazy to fill out the paperwork. It was fun to play with maze generation, though. I'd never done that before. And here's the maze that it generates. It's random each time. And you're the O at the upper left, and you hit the arrow keys to move around the maze, picking up gold and or swords, with which you can slay the dragons that are roaming around. And if you pick up all the gold before a dragon eats you, you win. And the AI for the dragons was pretty fun to work out. It's not all that great a game, but I did have a lot of fun working on it. Next up is my Wordle clone for the CoCo 3. I had fun seeding the word list with Tandy-related words. So you got, so Tandy is a valid word now. This isn't written in BASIC, of course. I think pretty much all of these games are on my GitHub, so you can play with them too or paw through the source code. The Lights Out puzzle is an oldie but a goodie. Google for Lights Out puzzle to learn some strategies for beating it. I'm not very good at beating it. I have done it, but use the joystick to click on various squares to toggle the lights in that general vicinity, and the goal is to get all of the lights to go out. Again, written in BASIC, and it's on the GitHub. This one's kind of a curiosity. Omnistar 84 is what I call it. Now remember, I said I couldn't find the notes for Omnistar, or the source, or anything, so I had to code it from faint memories of the basic concepts. When I was moving out of my house of 26 years, I discovered a dusty cardboard box at the bottom of a stack of boxes at the far corner of my basement that hadn't been touched since we moved in. So inside was a treasure trove of notes and listings from back in the day, including a listing of the source of the incomplete first attempt at coding the game from 1984. And there were also all the design notes. It was originally going to be a lot more convoluted than it ended up being many years later. Of course, it's hard enough to beat as it is, so maybe it's a good thing that I didn't have those. One challenge was that some sections of the listing, I had a program listing that I found, and some sections were garbled. The dot matrix printer was a little strange. The tractor feed slipped a bit. So there were some sections where there'd be like, 5 to 20 to 40 lines of type on the same line. That's what back in the day we used to call that compressed print. So we had to do a little detective work with some important contributions being made by Paul Fiscarelli to figure out what was in that. There were like 3 sections that were bad. And one was like, oh, it's kind of cramped, but yeah, no, I can still read it. And then one was like about 3 lines, and it's like, well, what is it doing in this section? I think what would be there would be these 3 instructions. Okay, that's fine. So that was fine. And then the one that was really compressed, Paul Fiscarelli basically took all the source he could find of mine on the GitHub, searched through it all to find, there's the section of code before and the section of code after. Where's some code that looks like that? He found it. And it's like, and it was like I think it was a line drawing routine from one of my games. I don't remember which one. So it's like I looked and it's like, yeah, that's the routine, all right. So we were able to fill that in. So Grant Blodo, who is a guy, he's a color computer guy that's local to me in Minnesota. Him and me typed it in. He started at the start, and I started at the end, and we met in the middle. And then after a lot of looking over for typos and a lot of debugging, we got it to work. And so you can run that, and this is what it looks like. And I hadn't remembered at all that I had made my own font for the game. That's like an OCR micro font, like you'd see at the bottom of checks. I'd say this game is this is about 10% done before I quit. Can't remember why I did. There are interesting sound effects with each keystroke too, but you can't hear them in this room because there's too much going on usually. But it sounds a bit like DTMF. It's like as you're typing, and as it is typing out characters, it does it like slowly, like it's on a 110 baud modem or something. It's not a playable game. It does do things. It's got some commands implemented, but I have no plans to finish it. It's just sort of a historical oddity, but you can play on it with it on my CoCo 3 at Neil's table if you like. So that about wraps it up. And here's the final slide with where you can find all this stuff. You can also go to rickadams.org by itself. Yep, take a picture of it with your phone. So now let's open it up for questions or discussion now. Yes?
Did Tandy ever cover your Easter egg in Temple of Rah?
Not that I ever heard of. I don't think they would have been too put out if they had. So basically, if you mashed the fire button down and you just kept it depressed for about 30 or 40 seconds, then it would turn on a flag that would say you can just walk through walls. But as soon as you let up on it, then you couldn't walk through walls anymore. Now, walking through walls with Temple of Rah will not help you at all, but it was just for fun. And then also, while you've got it pushed down, what if the bat shows up? Well, you need to fire at the bat, so you got to let go of the button. So what you need to do is you need to get to the entrance of a room, and the bat actually is randomly generated whenever you haven't been in trouble for a while. I have a haven't been in trouble for a while flag that increments all the time. If a monster sees you and starts heading for you, you're in trouble. So the flag gets reset. And then if you're not in danger, then it just keeps counting up every second. So you get at the entrance of a room and you mash that button down, and then you enter the room, and the monster heads for you. You exit the room, the monster forgets all about you and goes back to its home position. So you just keep doing that until finally you can walk through walls. So I had all kinds of weird ideas that I thought I was going to do, but it's like before I realized you do not have, your mind is writing checks that your talent can't cash. I was going to have like a little drawing of a McDonald's on the outside that you could only get to if you walk through walls. That's an homage to the lunar lander game where they had a McDonald's on the moon, and if you landed on top of the McDonald's, it would blow up the McDonald's, and then it would have a little text message that said, "You've just blown up the only McDonald's on the moon." And then there's one room in Temple of Rah that's really, really large, and I was going to put a working Space Invaders game in there that you could weave around to try to get through without dying. Well, no, that's not happening. Anyway, I've said too much on that question. Yes? Not at this second. I'm just doing little things in BASIC to just kind of have a little bit of fun. I don't have any large projects in mind at this point, but it could happen. The next thing I want to write, I'm going to give away all my ideas, and so somebody's going to go out and they're going to program this before I get done doing this, which is fine because I don't care. I remember doing like when I did ham radio. Yeah, just like Steve, I'm on Team ADD too, but I'm a nerd. But I did this thing called a fox hunt. They'd have a transmitter someplace in the city, and you'd take your radio equipment. You'd say, "Where is it?" "Oh, it's about this direction. Let's go that direction." And so I'm like, "What if you have like a maze, or replicate like city blocks or something? And here's a city. The 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 transmitter is somewhere, and you have here you are, and it's like, do you want to do like it's this direction? Do you want to give that kind of a clue? Do you want to give do the distance formula, and here's how far it is away from you? And you get, you're scored by maybe how many times do you take a reading? And you got to go, and as soon as you go over the square where the transmitter is, then you win the game. And it's like, how quickly and how efficiently did you do that? So that might be that's not all that hard to code. You just have to know the distance formula and a couple of other things. So that might be kind of fun. So I'm kind of thinking maybe I'll do that next. John. What was that? Oh, I think it was the bomb threat cartridge. Yeah, before the official cartridges came out, he 3D printed a cartridge that said bomb threat on it, had a little graphic of a bomb, and when he programmed an EEPROM and put it in there, and he says, "Here, I've just pirated your game." And then he gave it to me as a little, memento. So I still have that. Yeah. Yep. I have no problem with that. I have a problem with this bug, though. Yep. So when I sent in Temple of Rah originally, I sent it in with a cover letter, and they sent me back fairly quickly. It's like, well, we got it, and we'll review it in so many days, And then before that time was up, Mark called me and said, yeah, we're going to take it. So I don't remember how often they got a hold of me. It was usually phone calls and not letters. And they would say, yeah, we have people testing it, and there's various things that we want. Here's what we want the copyright message to look like. And originally, the game, when I sent it in, the player was a little white square, just like the Atari 2600 adventure game. So you could tell it was definitely influenced by that. They said, no, we don't want a white square. We want a little man running around. So I said, okay, I'll do that. What else do they want? Oh, the playtesters say that it's too hard to hit the enemies. Make the hitbox bigger. So I did. And that's about all there was. There's a lot of back and forth, of course, with Shanghai. I remember at one point they were like, the color blue that you're using, it needs to be bluer. And I looked at the color set, and it's like, that's as blue as I can make it, Chief. I'm giving it all she's got. I can't give it some more, So they say, no, it needs to be bluer. And I said, well, give me a color code. If you give me a color code, you give me that number, I will put it in. I don't even care if I think it looks magenta, So, so it was a number of months. It was maybe 6 months of back and forth before, it was all good. Going once, going twice. Oh, sorry. Yes, I did. Oh, I was so happy to get that thing. And then I got a hard disk too when I really got into the money. It was a huge hard disk. It was 40 megabytes. Oh, babies! I was really cooking then. Yeah, I got 2 disk drives, as a matter of fact, because why not? And all that stuff I gave away. I don't even want to discuss where it went. It didn't go to the landfill. It went someplace. Well, no, I'm not going to tell that story. It went to somebody that I don't like, but I'm not going to mention their name. But that person was not Steve Bjork, no. No, it was not Steve, yeah. Oh, that's Steve. I tell you. Yeah, when he threatened to sue me, he did it like secondhand. He told Marty Goodman, mention to Rick that I'm going to sue him for that money if he doesn't give it to me. So Marty told me, and I said, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. And then later Marty said, I shouldn't have done that. And it was like, Steve, you can do your own dirty work, okay? So Marty was in the Bay Area, and I was just north of that. I lived in California at the time, so I got together with Marty a number of times. That was pretty fun. He was kind of a weird guy. He was proud to say he was literally a card-carrying communist. He would show you the card. And he was very outspoken, and he was a columnist for Rainbow Magazine, and he had lots of opinions that were very strong. He didn't think much of Tandy a lot of times. He would always say, yeah, those cretinous chimpanzees at Tandy are up to it again. So it was kind of interesting.
Did you ever do any development for any other platforms?
No, actually. I've done a lot of web development work, of course, but that's not really a computer platform. I suppose technically it is. So since I was on Usenet, it was kind of interesting because there is a very, very famous person in early internet history whose name is Rick Adams. So when I got on Usenet, somebody sent me an email once that said, I'm sorry, that name is taken. You'll need to choose another. Because I was constantly getting mistaken for him. And somebody would say something on Usenet, and I would say, no, I agree with that person. And they'd say, oh, I'm so glad that somebody of your stature agrees with me. And I said, well, actually, I'm not that Rick Adams, okay? So early on, I had a very early website back in the days when you had to have the XYZ homepage, because a website was just a page and that was it, So I had the Colossal Cave Adventure homepage, and that was like in the early 1990s, and so fast forward to I was working for my first job in Minnesota. And they were about to get involved with the internet. It's like, wow, we're going to get involved with the internet. And that was back in the days when everything had to be Microsoft. So if it wasn't Microsoft there, it wasn't worth anything. So they had a guy coming in from Microsoft, from Redmond, Washington. He was going to teach us all about the internet. Well, I had been on the internet, but I was like the lowly new guy. So he comes in, and they're like, okay, we're getting this guy from Microsoft, okay, so mind your P's and Q's. Be very polite. So they had all the team was lined up, and here comes the guy, and they're rolling out the red carpet. They're introducing him to the team, and he's handshaking up and down, and I'm the last guy in line. And he gets to me, and he says, and this is Rick Adams, and he says, Rick Adams? The Rick Adams? And I'm like, who, the what now? And he says, the Rick Adams that did the Colossal Cave Adventure page? And I said, oh, that's what yeah, that's me. He says, I have always wanted to meet you. May I shake your hand? And everybody's like, what? I'm looking around. I have no idea if I've gone overtime, undertime, or what. Oh, that's about right. Okay. Well,
How did they treat you after that, when they saw the Microsoft guy was all
oh, yeah, well, good. I get to tell that story. Okay. So after that, one of the things they wanted to do, I was working for West Publishing, which has a very famous online database of legal opinions for lawyers to look up stuff. So that was running on some huge mainframes in the basement, and they wanted to interface that with the web. And so I said, well, yeah, we can do that. We have client software that interfaces with it via Telnet right now. So what you could do is you could write a gateway that, that logs in just like it's one of our client programs, pretends to be that, goes in, grabs the legal citations, pulls them out, logs out, and then we can gateway that to the web. We can do that with like a Perl script or something. And they said, oh, that won't work. I said, well, yeah, it will work. So about a week later, I brought my boss in and said, take a look at this. So I typed in a legal site and it pulled it up on the web. And she said, well, that's a very nice demo, but that won't work. And I said, look again, that is not a slideshow. That actually went and retrieved a site from Westlaw. Do you want me to do another site? And she said, I'll be right back. So she came back with her boss and said, show him that thing you just showed me. So I did. And he said, I'll be right back. So by the end of the day, the chief technology officer was in my cube, and I gave him a demo, and he said, yeah, we're doing that. So we got a team together, and we got that done, and they were very happy with that. And they said, yeah, we want to make this, we said, if you want to make this into a product, let us know your criteria. What are your requirements for this project? And we'll get that done. And he said, great, thanks. So I didn't hear back from them for a while until one day one of the higher-ups came in all of a tizzy. He says, where's that product you were going to do for us? And we said, we asked you for requirements and you never gave us any. And well, it turned out that our biggest competitor had, with their own database, competing database of legal citations, they had just interfaced with the web and they had just released it, beating us to market and leaving us flat-footed. So they said, I'll give you requirements, make it just like theirs, only better. So we did that. But then West Publishing had bought up, they have more money than God, so they had bought up a whole bunch of small companies all over the place. One of them was this scrappy little outfit in Atlanta, Georgia, and they thought that they were really hot stuff, and they fancied themselves like the skunk works for West Publishing. If you want something weird done, we can get that done. So, and no shade, they were probably quite good. Well, they had come up with their own gateway to the web. And so it's like, well, which one are we going to go with? So the higher ups up in the C-suites decided, well, let's make it a bake-off. Each of the two teams will write a report as to why theirs is better, and then we'll hire an independent guy to judge which one to go with. So we had to go through all this ramalama, and I'm sure going with either one would have been just fine if they would have flipped a coin. But we had to do all that and delay getting to market and getting even further behind. And finally, when the smoke cleared, they decided that ours was better. The other team, they said, well, ours is better because it has the West Pro protocol. And it's like, what? We have a protocol, just like they have a protocol, but we didn't give a fancy name, but it doesn't. There's not much difference there. So anyway, so we won, and the guys came down from the C-suites and said, good job, take the rest of the afternoon off, and so we took off. Yep. Oh boy. I worked there for 13 years. But now I'm retired. I like it. Well, we're running out of questions, so maybe we should wrap it up. Who makes the call? It is now wrapped up. Game is closed, I guess.